The morning air at Windsor Castle was crisp and silent. Too silent. A young guard stood at his post near the east terrace, his eyes scanning the gardens below. Something felt wrong. Couldn't explain it, but his instincts were screaming. Then he saw her. A small figure in a pink coat wandering alone near the castle's outer edge. Princess Charlotte. She was only 8 years old, and she was heading toward the unguarded path that led to the public road. His heart, stop protocol, said he couldn't leave his post. But every fiber in his body told him to move. He glanced left, then right. No other guards in sight. The little princess was now only steps away from disappearing beyond the hedgerow. He made his choice. The guard broke formation and started moving swiftly across the terrace. But before he could reach the stone steps, another figure appeared, tall, graceful, calm. Lady Louise Windsor emerged from the morning shadow of the old oak trees, walking with quiet purpose toward her young cousin. The guard froze. Louise was 19 then, soft-spoken and rarely in the spotlight. But in that moment, she moved with the kind of certainty that only comes from deep love and responsibility. She had been watching too. Charlotte turned at the sound of footsteps. Her face lit up when she saw Louise. "I wanted to see the swans," Charlotte said innocently, pointing toward the distant lake. Louise knelt down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Charlotte's face. "I know, sweetheart, but not alone. Not today." The guard finally reached them, his breath heavy, his face pale with relief. Louise looked up at him and gave a small, knowing nod. No words were needed. Between them, an understanding passed. They had both felt it. The danger, the near miss. If you're enjoying this story and want more incredible true moments like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what happens next. Louise gently took Charlotte's hand and began walking her back toward the castle's inner courtyard. The guard followed a few paces behind, his pulse still racing, as he had been trained for threats, for intruders, for protocol. But this was different. This was a child, royal blood or not, who had simply wandered too far. As they approached the castle doors, another figure appeared in the archway. It was a woman in a dark coat, her face unreadable. Catherine, the Princess of Wales. She had been searching. Her eyes met Louise's first, then the guard's. Then finally, they fell on Charlotte, safe and smiling. Catherine's shoulders dropped, the tension releasing all at once. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She walked forward, took Charlotte's other hand and whispered something only her daughter could hear. Louise stepped back quietly, as she always did, never seeking attention, never needing it. But Catherine turned before leaving. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." The guard nodded stiffly. Louise simply smiled. And as the princess and her daughter disappeared inside, the guard returned to his post, but his mind was somewhere else. On a girl who moved like a shadow, on a moment that could have ended very differently. He didn't know it yet. But this wasn't the first time Lady Louise had quietly stepped in, and it wouldn't be the last, because there was a bond between her and Charlotte, one that went deeper than family, deeper than duty. It was a bond born long ago in the final days of a queen. 3 years earlier, the halls of Windsor Castle felt heavier. Queen Elizabeth II was in her final weeks, and the entire royal family knew it. The world didn't yet, but those closest to her could feel time slipping away. Lady Louise visited often during those days. She was the Queen's youngest granddaughter through Prince Edward, quiet and thoughtful with her grandmother's same steady gaze. Elizabeth had always had a soft spot for her. Perhaps because Louise never asked for anything, never demanded the spotlight. She simply showed up. One afternoon, Louise arrived to find little Charlotte sitting outside the Queen's private sitting room. The girl was only 5 then, her legs swinging nervously from a velvet chair that was far too big for her. "Why are you out here?" Louise asked gently, sitting beside her. Charlotte's eyes were glassy. "Mummy said I shouldn't go in. Gangan is very tired." Louise's chest tightened, glanced at the closed door, then back at Charlotte. "Do you want to see her?" Charlotte nodded quickly. Louise stood and knocked softly. A moment later, A lady in waiting opened the door just a crack. Louise whispered something, and after a pause, the woman stepped aside. Louise took Charlotte's hand and led her in. The room smelled of lavender and old books. Sunlight poured through, the tall windows casting long golden beams across the carpet. And there, in her favorite chair by the window, sat the Queen. She looked small, fragile. But when she saw Charlotte, her face softened into a smile. "Come here, darling," Elizabeth said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Charlotte ran to her, climbing carefully onto the armrest. The Queen wrapped a thin arm around her great-granddaughter and kissed the top of her head. Louise stood near the door, watching. She didn't want to intrude, but the Queen's eyes found hers. "Stay, Louise," Elizabeth said. So she did. For the next 20 minutes, the three of them sat together in that golden light. The Queen told Charlotte a story about a pony she once had as a girl. Charlotte giggled and asked questions. Louise listened, memorizing every word, every breath, knowing these moments were numbered. When it was time to go, the Queen held Charlotte's small hand in both of hers. "You must always be brave, my dear, even when things are hard, especially then." Charlotte nodded, not fully understanding. Then Elizabeth looked at Louise. "And you," she said softly, "will help her remember that, won't you?" Louise felt a lump rise in her throat. She nodded. "Always." The Queen smiled. "Good." 2 weeks later, Elizabeth was gone. The world mourned. The family grieved in private. Louise kept her promise. She watched over Charlotte at the funeral, standing beside her during the long, silent procession. She held her hand when the cameras felt too close. She whispered calm words when Charlotte's lip began to tremble. Catherine noticed. William noticed, but they said nothing. They were grateful, because Louise understood something most people didn't. Charlotte wasn't just a princess. She was a little girl who had lost someone she loved. And Louise knew what that felt like. From that day forward, Louise became Charlotte's quiet guardian. Not officially, not publicly, but in the small, unseen ways that mattered most. She was there at family gatherings when Charlotte felt overwhelmed. She was there during palace events when the noise became too much. She was there in the gardens, teaching Charlotte how to ride, how to breathe, how to be still when the world felt loud. And Charlotte adored her. Whenever Louise arrived, Charlotte's face would light up. She would run to her arms wide, seeking the comfort only Louise seemed to provide. A comfort that didn't come with pressure or expectation. Its presence. Bond between them grew silently, naturally, like roots beneath the surface. And on that crisp morning at Windsor, when Charlotte wandered too far, Louise had been there again. Not by chance, by choice. The guard couldn't shake what he'd seen. For days after that morning at Windsor, the image stayed with him. Lady Louise, calm and certain. Princess Charlotte, safe in her hands. And the way Catherine had looked at them both, the gratitude words couldn't carry. He'd been with the Royal Guard for 6 years. He'd seen protocols, formations, and carefully planned security down to the second. But what he witnessed that day wasn't in any manual. It was instinct. Love. Trust. A week later, he was reassigned to Kensington Palace for a short rotation. It was routine. But on his second afternoon there, he saw Louise again. She was walking through the palace gardens with Charlotte, the two of them talking quietly. Charlotte was animated, pointing at something in the flower beds. Louise listened intently, nodding, smiling in that gentle way of hers. The guard watched from a distance, his curiosity growing. Who was this young woman who moved so carefully through the royal world? Who carried herself with such quiet grace? Who seemed to need nothing, yet gave everything? He asked an older colleague that evening, Lady Louise. The man said, pouring tea in the staff room. "She's Prince Edward's daughter. Youngest of the Queen's grandchildren through that line. Keeps to herself mostly. Studies at university. Doesn't do many public events. But she's close with Princess Charlotte." The older guard nodded. "Very. Has been since the Queen passed. Some say the Queen asked her to watch over the little one. Others say Louise just does it because she wants to. Why her? The man shrugged. Louise grew up differently than the others. She was born with an eye condition. Had surgeries as a child. Spent a lot of time out of the public eye because of it. Made her more private, more careful. Maybe that's why the Queen trusted her with Charlotte. She understands what it's like to need protecting. The guard absorbed this quietly. Over the next few months, he saw Louise often, always in the background. Always near Charlotte during family events. Never pushing forward. Never seeking credit. At a garden party that summer, he watched as Charlotte stumbled on the grass and scraped her knee. Before anyone else could react, Louise was already there, kneeling beside her. Wiping away tears with a handkerchief, Catherine arrived seconds later, but Louise had already calmed her. Charlotte wasn't crying anymore. She was laughing at something Louise whispered. Catherine caught the guard's eye across the lawn. She gave him a small, tired smile. A smile that said, "I see it too," because Catherine knew. She knew how much Louise did, how much she carried without complaint, and how rare that kind of selflessness was, even in a family built on duty. Later that evening, as guests filtered out and the sun dipped low, the guard found himself stationed near the palace's east wing. Louise walked by, alone as usual, heading toward her car. He hesitated. Then he spoke. "Lady Louise." She stopped and turned, surprised. "Yes, I just wanted to say," he paused, unsure how to phrase it, "thank you for what you do." "For Princess Charlotte," Louise blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I don't do anything special." "Yes, you do." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled softly. "She's family, that's all." But the guard knew better. Family didn't always mean protection. Didn't always mean presence. Didn't always mean sacrifice. Louise turned to leave, then stopped. "You were there that morning, weren't you?" At Windsor, he nodded. "Shh, you move fast," she said. "I saw you. You didn't hesitate. Neither did you." Louise's smile widened just slightly. "Then I suppose we make a good team." She walked away. Disappearing into the evening light, the guard returned to his post. But his mind stayed with her words, a good team. He realized then that what he'd witnessed wasn't just one moment, it was a system. A quiet, unspoken network of people who loved Charlotte, not because they had to, but because they chose to. And at the center of it all was a young woman who asked for nothing, who gave everything, who carried a promise made in a sunlit room, to a queen who knew exactly who to trust. ... Autumn came, and with it, a shift in the palace routines. The children returned to school. The family's public schedule grew busier. And Louise, as always, faded into the background. But she was still there. One October evening, Catherine hosted a small private dinner at Kensington Palace for close family. It was meant to be relaxed, intimate, a rare moment away from the cameras and schedules. Louise arrived quietly, as she always did. She greeted William and Catherine with a warm hug, then immediately found Charlotte, who had been waiting by the window.
"Oh, you came,"
Charlotte said, beaming. "Of course I did," Louise replied, ruffling her hair. Dinner was calm at first. Conversations flowed easily. Laughter filled the room. But halfway through the meal, Charlotte grew quiet. She picked at her food, her smile fading. Louise noticed immediately. She leaned over and whispered, "You all right?" Charlotte hesitated, then shook her head slightly. Louise glanced at Catherine, who was deep in conversation with Prince Edward. Then she quietly stood, took Charlotte's hand, and led her out of the dining room. No one else noticed. They walked through the hallway and out into the small courtyard garden behind the palace. The air was cool, and the evening sky was painted in deep purples and blues. Charlotte sat on a stone bench, her small hands folded in her lap. Louise sat beside her, waiting. "I miss Gangan," Charlotte finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Louise's heart ached. She wrapped an arm around Charlotte's shoulders. "I know. I miss her too. Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like." Louise closed her eyes, the words cutting deeper than she expected. "That happens," she said gently, "but you'll always remember how she made you feel." that doesn't fade. Charlotte looked up at her. How did she make you feel? Louise thought for a moment. Safe. Like I could be myself, and that was enough. Charlotte nodded slowly. She made me feel that way too. They sat in silence for a while, the distant sound of London traffic humming beyond the palace walls. Then Charlotte leaned into Louise's side, and Louise held her close. Do you think she's proud of me? Charlotte asked. I know she is, Louise said, without hesitation. She loved you so much, Charlotte, and she knew you'd grow up to be strong and kind. Just like her? Charlotte didn't respond, but Louise felt her small body relax. The tension melting away. After a few more minutes, they returned inside. Catherine was standing in the hallway, clearly having realized Charlotte was gone. Her eyes were wide with concern, but when she saw them together, her expression softened. Everything okay? Catherine asked carefully. Louise nodded. Just needed some air. Catherine looked at Charlotte, who was smiling again. Then she looked at Louise, and in her eyes was something deeper than gratitude. It was relief. Trust. The kind of trust you can only place in someone who truly understands. Thank you, Catherine said quietly. Louise simply smiled and returned to the table. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Catherine sat with William in their private sitting room. The fire crackled softly, and the house was finally still. She's incredible with her, Catherine said, staring into the flames. William didn't need to ask who. Louise has always been like that. Steady, reliable. More than that, Catherine continued. Charlotte trusts her in a way she doesn't trust many people. And I think the Queen knew that would happen. William nodded slowly. She probably did. Granny had a way of seeing people clearly. Catherine looked at him. Do you think she asked Louise to look after Charlotte? I don't know. But even if she didn't, Louise would do it anyway. Catherine smiled sadly. I know, and I'm so grateful. Because I can't always be there. Not the way Charlotte needs. But Louise can. They sat in silence for a while, both thinking about the young woman who asked for nothing, who carried so much, and who loved their daughter with a fierceness that was quiet but unshakable. Outside, city lights glimmered in the distance. And somewhere across town, Lady Louise was returning to her small university flat, unaware of the conversation happening in her. Honor she didn't need to know, because she wasn't doing this for recognition. She was doing it because a queen had once looked into her eyes and asked her to be brave, to help someone else be brave, and Louise had never forgotten. Winters settled over London, bringing with it the busy blur of holiday preparations. The royal family's calendar was packed with events, charities, and public appearances. For Charlotte, it meant long days, heavy schedules, and far too many cameras. She was only 8, but the weight of expectation was already pressing on her small shoulders. One December afternoon, Catherine found Charlotte sitting on the floor of her bedroom, knees pulled to her chest, staring blankly at the wall. Sweetheart. Catherine knelt beside her. What's wrong? Charlotte didn't look up. I'm tired, Mummy. Catherine's chest tightened. She knew that kind of tired. It wasn't about sleep. Do you want to talk about it? Charlotte shook her head. Catherine stayed for a few more minutes, but Charlotte remained silent. Eventually, Catherine kissed her forehead and left the room, her heart heavy with worry. That evening, she made a call. Louise, I'm sorry to bother you, but could you come by tomorrow? Charlotte's having a hard time, and I think she needs you. There was no hesitation on the other end. Of course, I'll be there in the morning. The next day, Louise arrived just after breakfast. Charlotte's face lit up the moment she saw her. The heaviness in her eyes lifted, if only a little. Want to go for a walk? Louise asked gently. Charlotte nodded eagerly. They bundled up in coats and scarves and headed out into Kensington Gardens. The air was crisp, the trees bare, and the ground crunched softly beneath their boots. For a while they didn't speak, just walked, side by side, breathing in the cold winter air. Finally, Charlotte broke the silence. You ever feel like everyone's watching you? Like you can't mess up? Louise glanced down at her, surprised by the question, but she understood it. deeply. Yes, all the time when I was younger. Really? Really, Louise said. I used to hate going to events. Everyone's staring, wondering if I'd do something wrong, if I'd embarrass my parents. Charlotte looked up at her. But you're so calm, you never seem scared. Louise smiled softly. That's because I learned something important. You want to know what it is? Charlotte nodded quickly. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be kind and honest. That's all anyone can really ask of you. Charlotte thought about this for a moment. But what if I make a mistake? Then you make a mistake, Louise said simply. Everyone does. Even the Queen made mistakes. Charlotte's eyes widened. Gangan, of course. She was human, just like us. But she never let the fear of messing up stop her from being herself, and that's what made her so strong. They walked in. Silence for a few more minutes, the words settling into Charlotte's heart. Then Louise stopped and crouched down to Charlotte's level. You know what else Gangan told me once? She said the bravest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it. That's not weakness, that's strength. Charlotte's lip trembled slightly. I don't want to disappoint anyone. Louise's eyes softened. You couldn't disappoint us if you tried, Charlotte. We love you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. Charlotte's composure finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she threw her arms around Louise, burying her face in her coat. Louise held her tightly, her own eyes stinging. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Just held her, letting her cry, letting her release everything she'd been holding in. When Charlotte finally pulled back, her face was red and puffy, but she looked lighter, freer. Thank you, she whispered. Louise brushed a tear from Charlotte's cheek. Anytime, I mean that. They walked back slowly, hand in hand. When they reached the palace, Catherine was waiting by the door. She saw Charlotte's face, saw the tear stains, and immediately looked at Louise with a question in her eyes. Louise gave her a small, reassuring nod. Catherine exhaled, relief flooding through her. She knelt down and pulled Charlotte into a hug. I love you so much, she whispered. I love you too, Mummy. Later, as Louise was preparing to leave, Catherine walked her to the car. I don't know what you said to her, Catherine began, but she's different, lighter. Louise smiled gently. She just needed to know it's okay to not be okay sometimes. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. How do you always know exactly what she needs? Because I remember what I needed at her age, Louise said quietly. Someone who didn't expect me to be perfect. Someone who just let me be. Catherine reached out and squeezed Louise's hand. I don't say this enough, but you're a gift to our family. To her. To all of us. Louise's cheeks flushed slightly. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, Catherine said firmly. You're doing what very few people would do, and we're so grateful. Gosh. Louise didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, smiled, and got into her car as she drove away. Catherine stood in the cold, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. Inside, William found her standing there. Everything all right? Catherine turned to him, tears still glistening in her eyes. She's exactly what the Queen said she'd be. William tilted his head. What do you mean? When the Queen was ill, she told me something, Catherine said softly. She said, watch Louise. She'll take care of Charlotte when I can't. William's expression softened. She knew. She always knew. Spring returned to England, bringing with it longer days and softer light. The palace gardens bloomed with color, and life felt a little easier. Charlotte was smiling more, laughing more. And though the weight of her future still lingered, it no longer crushed her because she knew she wasn't carrying it alone. One warm afternoon in April, the family gathered at Windsor for a private celebration. It was Prince Edward's birthday, and the occasion was small, intimate. Just close family, no press, no cameras. Just the people who mattered most. Charlotte spent most of the afternoon with Louise, as she always did. They sat together under the old oak tree where Louise had first spotted her that morning, months ago. The same tree, the same place. But everything felt different now. Do you ever think about Gangan? Charlotte asked, plucking blades of grass between her fingers. "Every day," Louise said honestly. "Do you think she can see us?" Louise looked up at the sky, the clouds drifting lazily above them. "I think so. I think she's probably watching right now, smiling at how much you've grown." Charlotte smiled at the thought. "I hope she's proud." "She is," Louise said with certainty. "I know she is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting from the terrace behind them. Then Charlotte turned to Louise with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something? Of course, will you always be here? Even when I'm older?" Louise's heart squeezed. She reached out and took Charlotte's hand. "Always, no matter what. I promise." Charlotte nodded, satisfied, and leaned her head against Louise's shoulder. From the terrace, Catherine and William watched them together. Catherine's hand rested over her heart, her eyes soft with emotion. "She's going to be all right," William said quietly. "Yes," Catherine whispered. "Because of her." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the gardens, the family gathered for a photograph. It was casual, unposed. Just everyone standing together, smiling. Charlotte stood between Louise and Catherine, her small hand gripping Louise's tightly. The photographer snapped the picture, capturing a moment that would be treasured for years to come. Later that evening, as guests began to leave, the guard who had been stationed that morning at Windsor months ago was ending his shift. He saw Louise walking toward her car, and once again he found himself compelled to speak. "Lady Louise," he called. She turned, recognizing him immediately. "Hello again," he approached, his expression respectful but warm. "I just wanted to say, I've been watching over these past months, and I've seen what you do. How you care for her." Louise's cheeks flushed. "I'm just her guardian angel," he interrupted gently. "Whether you call it that or not. And I think the Queen knew exactly what she was doing when she trusted you with that." Louise's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "She trusted all of us, you included." The guard shook his head. "Not like you. You gave up your privacy, your time, your freedom, and you never asked for anything in return." Louise looked down, uncomfortable with the praise. "She's family. That's what you do." "Not everyone does," the guard said. "But you do. And that's why she'll grow up strong. Because of people like you." Louise met his gaze, and for a moment, they simply understood each other. Two people who had witnessed something sacred, something rare. "Thank you," Louise said softly. The guard nodded and stepped back. "No, thank you." Louise got into her car and drove away, the weight of the day settling over her. She thought about the Queen, about Charlotte, about the promise she'd made in that sunlit room, and she realized something. She wasn't just keeping a promise to the Queen, she was honoring a bond that had been built through love, through loss, through quiet moments that no one else saw, a bond that would last a lifetime, because Charlotte wasn't just a princess to her, she was family. She was someone Louise had chosen to protect, to guide, to love, and no title, no duty, no expectation could ever change that. As Louise drove through the London streets, she thought about the future, about the woman Charlotte would become, about the challenges she'd face, about the moments Louise would be there for, and the moments she wouldn't. But she knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened, Charlotte would never walk alone, because Lady Louise Windsor made a promise, and she would keep it. Always back at Windsor. Charlotte stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the gardens below. The moon was rising, casting silver light across the trees. She thought about Louise, about everything she'd done, everything she'd been, and Charlotte made a silent promise of her own. One day, when she was older, when she had children of her own, she would do the same. She would be someone's Louise, because that's what the Queen had. It's taught them that's what love looked like. Quiet, steady, unshakable. And as Charlotte climbed into bed that night, she whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Gangan." For her, and somewhere in a place beyond sight, beyond words, Elizabeth smiled, because she had known all along that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't protection. It's someone who will stand beside them when the world feels too heavy. Someone who will hold their hand in the dark. Someone who will love them, not for who they're supposed to be, but for who they are. Lady Louise Windsor was that person, and Princess Charlotte would never forget it.